Okay. Welcome to Collapse Broadcast. Just make sure I am live. You do not have a behavior problem. You've been arriving after the route has already run. So by the time you call it overthinking, the route has already been selected. By the time you call it sabotage, the route has already been selected. By the time you call it avoidance, shutdown, need, wanting, identity, nervous system, values, or reaction, the route has already been selected. And that is why so much work starts too late. It keeps trying to correct the evidence. Output is not origin. The market has mistaken the first visible layer for the first causal layer. The thought appears first. So people think thought is the origin. The feeling appears first. So people think that feeling is the origin and focus on the feeling. The nervous system activates, so people think that regulation is the origin. The behavior appears, so people think behavior is the origin. The identity is declared, and people think that the identity is origin. But visibility is not causality. My name is Judy V, and I am the originator of the Codex System, a structural model of human function and behavior. And through the Codex System, I read the root generating the output. Codex names and classifies the architecture of that root. And the work clears interference at the generating layer. So if you've joined me, welcome. And if you've got any questions, please put it into the chat and I will address it. If you're watching the replay, then put in the comments any questions you might have, because I am going to say some of the unsayable today. I'm going to say things that have never been said, but have been thought. I guarantee that. Psychology describes behavior after it appears. I read the root before behavior appears. This is not coaching, and it is not a method. It's not another way to manage behavior after it appears. It is where what I call the false origin loses authority. I'm going to show it to you today, and it's going to be unmistakable. You cannot unsee it. You cannot unhear it. The thing you were told was the cause may only be the place where the root became visible. You were taught to keep adding explanation to something that was never being generated at that layer. Because human behavior is not primarily psychological. It is generated through rooting before it becomes visible as a thought, as emotion, as identity, as an action, or a repeated pattern. So the thought may be output, the feeling, the state, the identity, the behavior, all are outputs. All of it may be appearing after the root is already selected. And people are exhausted because they have been given more language for what still repeats over and over. They do not need another explanation at the output layer. The false origin has to lose authority. Then the root producing the output can be read. It's not an issue of not understanding it enough. We understand more than we've ever understood about behavior. We have more awareness than we've ever had, more insight than we've ever had. But we've been taught to work at the layer where the pattern has become visible, and output is not origin. Behavior is where the root becomes visible. That is it. And that is where we're going to begin today. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to take one of the most coached, spiritualized, and repeated ladders in the market today. I'm going to dissect it. I need, I want, I am. 3 different statements, but they can all be produced by the same root. That is why upgrading the language does not prove the authority has changed. Changing the language does not prove the signal is clean. I need can reveal obvious dependency. I need more money. I need a relationship. I need a car. I need. I want can sound less contracted than I need, while still organizing life around absence or lack. I am can sound complete while functioning as identity manufacture, a self being installed to secure an outcome. And even I am, without an object, can become management if it has to be held, maintained, embodied, aligned with, performed, or used to make life respond. And that is the issue. What is the generating statement? And what is the body attempting to produce through it? Because clean signal does not need to convert need into desire, or desire into identity, or identity into transcendence. Need, want, and I am are not levels of consciousness. They are outputs. None of them tells you whether the root beneath them is clean. And for clarity, when I say root, I mean R-O-U-T-E, root, not root as in R-O-O-T. Because the self-help market has been obsessed with the root cause, the wound, the belief, the childhood event, the nervous system pattern, the hidden block, the value conflict. But root cause, and listen and hear me loud, the root cause is usually searched for inside what has already become visible. So I don't waste time there. I'm not looking for root cause. I'm reading root selection, R-O-U-T-E. Because root cause explains backwards. The root reveals what is organizing forward movement before the output appears. And this is where so much transformation work becomes managed life. That's the tragedy. transformation has become more management of life. Someone says there is, in the personal development world, self-help world, whatever, coaching world, they say that there's nothing to create. And then in the next breath, prescribes coherence holding, frequency matching, holding the frequency, holding the line, vision holding, energetic alignment, behavioral alignment, identity embodiment, nervous system regulation, belief correction, value alignment. All of that is management. It's still management. And I put it to you, we are not here to live a life managed. We're not here to spend second after second, minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, managing life. We are here to live it, experience it. It has simply moved management from chasing the outcome to managing the internal state believed to summon it. The life is still being managed. Only management has become more refined. We now focus on refining the management. This is not a small market error. Entire industries are built around learning, reprogramming, regulating, embodying, optimizing, understanding, and aligning. And still, for many people, life remains managed. Because if the root remains unchanged, every new method simply gives management a better costume. And this is why people can feel like they're growing and still feel trapped. Outside improves, the language improves, the recovery may even improve temporarily, but the life is still organized around the same output. That is not liberation. That is a more elegant relationship with the cage. You can debate, I need. You can refine, I want. You can install the I am. You can raise your frequency, reframe your beliefs, rewire your brain, regulate your nervous system, align with your values, embody your future self. And if the root is not changed, the output will reorganize around the same authority. There may be temporary shifts, there may be relief, there may be a cleaner state or a better language, but when consequence rises, when the thing happens, the root tells the truth. And that's why things happen over and over again. That's why things repeat over and over again. That is why we come back to the internal crime scene that we have created, that, well, what's wrong with me? Because output is not origin. Neither is language, identity, state. The root is still the question. And once that is seen, something else becomes very clear. Most of what is sold as transformation is actually output correction. Sometimes it creates a shift, as we've said. Sometimes it might even create relief. It creates a momentary sense of calm, that aha or that breakthrough. But it does not prove origin has changed. And the evidence of that is the thing happens again and again and again. And we enter into another loop of searching for the next aha, the next breakthrough. Constantly looping. Change the language, change the belief, the state, the behavior, the thought. Change the nervous system response, the identity, the frequency, the value hierarchy. But all of it may still be happening after the root has already run. And that is the part that the market is refusing to locate. Because if the root has already selected, if the root is already rooting, then changing what appears afterwards may produce relief, improvement, insight, regulation, or a temporary shift. But it does not prove the origin has changed, and that's why it repeats. It proves that output was modified. That's it. An output modification can look very sophisticated. It can look refined. It can look like emotional intelligence. It can look like spiritual maturity, deeper embodiment. It can look like an evolution or an elevation in nervous system mastery, more self-awareness, more value alignment. It can look like manifestation. It can look like leadership development. But if the root is still producing the same authority under pressure, the system has not changed at origin. It has just learned a better way to manage the output, which maintains and reinstalls the requirement, the necessity, the addiction to living life managed. And this is why people become more polished, not more free. They speak better, regulate better, explain better, manage better, cope better, choose better words, know their pattern faster, recover faster, apologize faster, forgive faster, and return to coherence faster. But the same root is still in authority. So life becomes faster recovery from the same pattern, cleaner language around the same pattern, better management from the same pattern, more conscious participation in the same pattern. That is not freedom. That is upgraded management. Because a refined output is still output. A regulated output is still output. A high frequency output is still output. Origin has not been reached just because the output became more elegant. This is not new for me. I saw the structure before I had language for this. Codex did not begin as a theory. It became the architecture through which I could name, I could classify, test, and apply what I had already been seeing. And I've been seeing this since I was about 15 years old, long before Codex existed or the word Codex existed. One morning, the story stopped being the operating system for me. Interpretation ended. The circumstances happened. They had happened, but they no longer got to become me. And that changed the trajectory of my life. And everything I have built since has come from that structural seeing. And over the years, the language has changed, the architecture has sharpened, and the work formalized. But the origin of this work was never theory. It was seeing what was operating underneath the story. And this is why I do not begin with behavior. I do not begin with thought or identity or state. I look for what has already taken authority before those layers appear. And this is why I do not begin with what someone says, feels, thinks, chooses, believes, wants, or does. I read what has already taken authority before those layers appear. Through the Codex System, I read the root generating the output, and Codex names and classifies the architecture of that root, and the work clears interference at the generating layer. I want to speak about something slightly different. There are 4 key false origins the market keeps returning to: thought, state, identity, behavior. And thought is where the root may become language, and the state is where the root may become felt condition. Identity is where the root may become a self-concept, and behavior is where the root becomes visible action. But none of them prove origin. They are evidence points, not source points. Because here's what happens with those false starts. If you work with thought, you change narration. If you work with state, you change the felt condition. If you work with identity, you change the self being performed. If you work with behavior, you change the visible action. That's it. But Codex is asking an earlier question. What root produced the thought, the state, the identity, and the behavior? And this is why people have become tired, exhausted. Even though they say they have tried everything, they are tired because they have done so much at the wrong layer. They've changed the thought, changed the belief, changed the state, changed the identity a gazillion times over. Changed the habit, changed the language, changed the nervous system response, and still under consequence, something old, familiar, again, takes authority again and again and again. That kind of exhaustion is different. It is the exhaustion of being sent to the wrong layer for years. The personal development industry has trained people to treat their own output as instructions. If fear appears, listen to it. If the body contracts, obey it. If the story activates, process it. If the nervous system responds, regulate it. If the behavior repeats, correct it. If the identity feels incomplete, rebuild it. All sounds compassionate. All sounds intelligent. All sounds responsible. At least that's what we have been taught it is. But it is late. Because output was never meant to lead. Output is meant to reveal that a route has already run. It is evidence. And that is the reversal. The behavior is not there to be obeyed, polished, explained, or upgraded. It is there to become something it is there because something has already taken authority. And once you understand that, the entire market looks different. Because you stop asking, how do I improve this output? How do I improve my nervous system state? How do I improve my relationship? How do I make more money? How do I clear my money blocks? How do I stop racing? How do I stop getting so emotional? How do I stop reacting and responding? And you start asking a very different question. What root produced this? And this is the part I want you to feel in your own life, not just understand as a concept. If you've spent years doing the work and still find yourself managing the same output, that's not theoretical. Look at where life still asks to be managed. The conversation you still rehearse before you have it. If you're an entrepreneur, the offer you keep refining instead of naming it. The visibility you keep preparing for. The body response you keep organizing your day around. The money decision that still creates contraction. The relationship dynamic you can explain perfectly but still enter again and again and again and repeat on repeat. The delay that keeps arriving dressed as discernment. The exhaustion that keeps being explained as having a lot on. That is output. And if you keep trying to correct it at the level where it appears, the life remains managed. And that is the cost. Not that nothing changes. Something often changes in the moment. As I've said, you get a better language. You may even get a calmer state. You get more awareness. You explain it more responsibly or intelligently, but the same place has still to be managed. What does that cost? Life force energy, vitality. Robbing of time and space. Robbing of a life of expression and freedom. When life still has to be managed, that is how you know the generating root has not been read. And this is where the work becomes very simple. If the root is not being read, you will keep trying to solve life from the evidence. You will keep working with what appeared, and you will keep treating the output as if it is instruction. And that is why the next move cannot be another insight, another explanation, another identity shift or regulation or breathwork practice or another promise to do better. Or another self-attack, creating more of an internal crime scene, blaming yourself. The next move has to match the layer where the output is being produced. The root has to be read. The distortion has to be identified. The interference governing the root has to be cleared. Then output has to be tracked through consequence. What happens then when the thing happens again? What is the consequence of the interference that was governing the route that has been cleared? That's the only thing that matters. Not being able to describe it better, not being able to articulate it better, not being able to manage it better. But what changes? What's the consequence when the interference governing the route has been cleared? So if this has located something in you, the next move has to match the level of the problem. If the issue was lack of explanation, more explanation would have changed it. If the issue was lack of awareness, then awareness would have ended it. If the issue was lack of effort, then effort would have moved it by now. And let's face it, I'm sure it is not lack of effort. How much effort have you put into managing life? But if the output keeps repeating, the generating root has to be read. What is rooting? Where is it rooting from? What keeps taking authority before the behavior appears? And I want to reiterate something and be very precise about something. A root cannot be guessed from the output. That's another place where people go wrong. They think because they know the behavior, they know the cause. They think because they can name the pattern, the root is obvious. It is not. The same visible output can come from completely different roots. Two people can procrastinate for entirely different reasons. Two people can contract around money from different root authority. Two people can avoid visibility with different structures underneath it. Two people can look regulated and still obey different signals. So this is not a question. So the question is not, what is the behavior? It's what root is producing this output in this person. What root is producing in me? And that is why the read matters. If the root is not read, the distortion cannot be accurately identified. If the distortion is not accurately identified, the wrong layer gets worked. And if the wrong layer gets worked, the output may change, may shift, may soften, regulate, or even look more conscious, while the root remains governed by the same interference, meaning the same thing will happen again and again and again. And this is how people lose years, no matter how many of the different modalities they try, because they did a lot at the wrong layer. So the read begins with a structural review. And a structural review is where I read the generating root behind what keeps repeating for you and identify the correct next access route. It's not a discovery call. It's not advice. It's not reassurance. It's not a conversation about the pattern. It is where the root producing the output is located accurately. And when the output is repeated across time under pressure, across body, behavior, decision, family, money, visibility, or practical life consequence, the work does not end at one recognition point. And this is where the cosmic tribe comes in. It's not a group container, it's a personalized structural field of live codex application, where repeated output is tracked, where distortion is governing the root, where the distortion is governing the root, it is identified, interference is cleared at the generating layer, consequence is measured, not as theory, not as I feel good, not as I feel better, or this feels right, or I resonate, none of that, but as life output. That is the only thing that matters. Because the point is not to understand the root once. The point is to stop the root from continuing to organize the life. So you do not manage life. You get to live life. This means your life is not treated as a collection of separate problems. It's not like your body is over there, the money's there, the family is somewhere else. Decisions are not, and the decisions are not disconnected. Visibility is not a separate issue. They are all outputs, evidence of what is rooting. And in the cosmic tribe, output is tracked through consequence. So the root producing it can be corrected. This is why this is not group work. It's not content. It's not support. It's not coaching. It is structural correction over time. This is where the life you have been managing starts revealing the root that made the management necessary. And when that root changes, life no longer has to be organized around managing the same output. And if this is your point of contact, begin with a structural review. That is where I'm going to read the root generating, what keeps repeating, and identify whether the correct next access route is the cosmic tribe, origin 5, private immersion, or another route entirely. The route determines the next step, not your story, not your preference, not the output by itself, the route. Output is not origin, so do not make the next move another output. Begin where the root can be read. The world has been correcting evidence and calling it transformation. Output is not origin. So begin where the root can be read. I will put a link into the description for the structural review. And I will see you next time at the next Collapse broadcast.